what I thought going into it with lack of logistics headaches and gear bends and all that stuff. It was just fantastic. It was really awesome to just have the two of us in our backpacks and be making decisions based on what we were carrying.
Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. In adventure racing lingo, a dark zone is a time when, due to darkness or safety, teams are paused on the course before continuing with the race. During that time, stories are exchanged, friendships are kindled, spirits are restored, and teams have a chance to prepare for the next challenge. We hope that you make good use of this dark zone. We're glad that you're here. Well, here we go. Episode number 51 of the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is hot on the heels of episode 50 with Nathan Fave. Very popular episode, our most popular so far, as you could tell. Nathan was a great guest. We appreciate you joining us for that episode. A lot of new listeners are out there now. Today's episode is with Michael Dickey and Earl Blanchard. They were the recent winners of Pack Rafting Adventures Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge, set in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State. Eric Kalevala and his team put on a great bare bones, back to nature primal race with pack rafts and hiking that was a smashing success for its first outing. In the show notes, I'm going to post a copy of the map. Very helpful to go to those show notes, packraftingadventures.com as well, and check out the maps. Eric was kind enough to put down the routes for all the teams in his 30-hour 4-checkpoint race in the backcountry of New York State. We're glad that you're here. We hope that everyone's having a great October. A bit of an off season for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere. Good training to everybody. Once again, happy to have you as a listener. Our guests are great. Thank you to Michael and Earl for joining us. We will see you at the Dark Zone and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. It's your host, Brian Gatens. We are joined today by Team Peak Happiness, Earl Blanchard and Michael Dickey, won the inaugural Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge. This was a very unique race that was put on this past summer by Eric Kalavala's Pack Rafting Adventures. It consisted of only 4 checkpoints in the Adirondack Park in Upper New York State, with a total of 30 hours. So think about that, folks. 30 hours to find 4 checkpoints. You do some races, you do AR Croatia, and you will find 30 checkpoints in 4 hours. So clearly this was a unique event that was put on by Eric and his team up there. So we're delighted to have Earl and Michael join us. They took the win, as I mentioned. Their finishing time was 15:43. So they were lightning fast on the course. We look forward to hearing about their experience out there. This was the first time that it was put on, as I mentioned, and so I'm sure they'll have some feedback on what it was like to race in such a rugged territory. Earl, I'm going to throw the first question over to you. Tell us a bit about what were you thinking signing up for a race that was this remote and this rugged? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, that's actually what drew me to the race. That's why I reached out to Michael and said, hey, this is something we should do. I saw that it was going to be a wilderness race. I spent quite a bit of time out in the wildlands all over the place. I lived in Alaska for a short stint and did lots of backcountry there. I do lots of backcountry here. And the fact that we were going to be in a trailless area really had my attention. That's really what pulled me in. And the fact that it was going to be foot travel and pack rafting. And pack rafting, I'm new to that. I've been a whitewater rafting guide for 30 years, but I haven't pack rafted a lot. Matter of fact, I've only done that a couple of times. So that really had my attention. Heard a lot about the pack rafting side of the newer element to adventure racing. And that's really just seeing the point that was only 5 checkpoints wasn't a big draw for me, because I really like the open strategy. But I was also thinking about the vast distance between checkpoints, and that, to me, was also catching my attention.
So it was those two things. It was the rugged nature of Adirondack Park, which, for those who don't know, is a piece of land that's been preserved in New York State that is the size of the state of Massachusetts. It's a tremendous piece of land. Private landowners, public lands. Some's been logged, some's not been logged. Really kind of a trailless system. I think for the East Coast of America, pretty much as close as you get to rugged backcountry you're going to find. Maybe you'd have to go to Maine for that too. Michael, yourself, what drew you to the race?
Well, I had actually talked with someone else a little bit before Earl called me about doing the race, and many of the same things that interested Earl. But when Earl sent me a note, I guess he didn't call, sent me a note and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" I was told the point-to-point aspect of where you leave the start with everything, and there's no TAs or no transitions, no mucking with logistics and gear bins and stuff like that. It's just leave and you've got what you're taking with you, and make your way to the finish. And that I think the simplicity of it was really appealing to me. I loved it.
It's true, adventure racing, right? And this was a pack rafting combination trekking race, right? So what's called an adventure race. But I do agree with you that adventure racing in many places is very top heavy. The amount of gear you have to transport, the logistics, right? A bin and TA, a bike box, and things like that. This race, when I first learned about it, felt almost primal, right? It's you, it's your teammate, it's your gear, and off you go into this huge swath of land going into it. As you looked at it, as you thought about it, and this is a big topic of conversation for this episode, the navigation had to be something else, because this was a unmapped, well, and they call it unmapped isn't fair, untrekked piece of land. How did you do with First off, was there a lead navigator, or did the two of you work together? That's one question I'll bring up. And the second one is, walk us through, how did you navigate in such rugged terrain?
I'll jump in there. So I held the maps most of the time, and Earl told me what I was doing wrong.
Okay. Great strategy. Right.
Good teamwork. See?
Right.
Yeah. So I could say I was maybe lead navigator, but I think we worked together on it. We looked at maps together. I held them most of the time, and then Earl called me on it when something didn't look right, and that worked really well. The race actually was kind of checkpoint one to checkpoint two. That was the race. The rest of it, pretty straightforward. There were still ways to goof things up. But checkpoint one to checkpoint two was the most navigation, the biggest hunk of time. If you looked at the maps afterwards and saw the routes that Eric drew, that's where people just scattered and picked, at least a dozen different routes. And that is really what made the team fun. That was the big distance, lots of choice, and it was very clear from the results that people approached it very differently.
Which is interesting, right? Because sometimes in adventure racing, for lack of a better term, kind of a conga line breaks out, right? And there's a lot of teams picking the same route. And I have had a chance to see the various choices that people took. And there was some land you couldn't touch. There's some private land that Eric had to have you work around. And people took so many different route choices. What drove your route selection? Was it the ease of travel? Was it the direct nature from getting to the first checkpoint to the second checkpoint? I mean, because, well, first things first, how long did it take you? Do you remember how long it took you to get from checkpoint one to checkpoint two?
I remember it being a little over 7 hours, maybe 7.5 hours.
That's what I was remembering, about 7.5 hours.
So think about that now, everybody. Folks sitting at home, do that math. Race starts. Checkpoint one is relatively simple, right? It was a paddle across a lake.
Paddle straight to it. Yep.
Right at it. I'm looking at it right now on the maps. But then you had this huge north one you had to go, where you actually crossed 4 separate maps to get to checkpoint two. 7.5 hours, with your winning time being 15 hours. So half your race was spent getting from one checkpoint to another. Correct. What drove your route choice in there? Was it, once again, was it the ease of travel, the direct nature of it? Was it the maps? What jumped out at you?
We looked at a lot of different choices. We got the maps the evening before, and just looking at the vast amount of choices. You could have gone north and to the west and probably picked up a trail, and I think some teams did that. Earlier on, but you would have had to cut through a bit of wilderness there. You wouldn't have been as much pack rafting. There was also a map that we used as well. It was a blowdown map. So there was, back in the 80s, I think, Michael.
Mid-90s, I think.
Mid-90s, there was a huge storm and it knocked down a lot of trees. And so they actually had a map that had these areas shaded that were, low, medium, or high blowdown quantities. And so we used that to help guide to help eliminate, okay, well, maybe we won't go this way, but we'll go another direction.
So that's pretty intense that they gave you a blowdown map. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't think I've been in a race where I had one of those before. I know I would have liked to have one before, but not.
Yeah, I did a race up in Nova Scotia, and called the Eco Challenge. It was a 24-hour race up there, and they did the same thing. That a derecho came through and knocked down a huge swath, and it was excellent on the map. And they were like, "Listen, you could travel that way if you want, but we really don't recommend it." We touched the outer edges of it, and it was impenetrable. You couldn't get over it. It was just the way the logs were on top of each other. There was no movement. So I'm assuming seeing a blowdown map might have given you a little bit of a pause to think about the type of route choice.
It did. Having seen areas with a lot of blowdown, like I do not want to get in an area where half the trees in the forest are laying sideways and have been and having stuff grow on them, and they had no interest in doing that. So we did use that map. The other thing that we did, and I think we talked about this afterwards, I think we agreed that we could have picked a faster route.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But this was a pack draft race. And so we looked at our options, said, we could do this whole thing on foot, but we've got the raft in the backpack and we're carrying our paddles and we came here to paddle. So let's get on that river and paddle the river. And then we talked about, man, that really looks windy. Turns out that paddling distance was almost twice the linear distance. But we chose to paddle because that's what we came to do.
You wanted to paddle,
and we're glad we chose that.
When you think about it and the race being over, what percentage of your time did you spend in your boat versus on your feet?
Well, good question.
I think it was close to about 50-50.
Yeah,
50-50.
I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. And how did you find and you said that you wanted to do the pack raft, right? You came to do a pack. It was not a trek, right? And it was very funny when I looked at the maps that Eric sent over. I sent him back what I would have done. He goes, "You do realize you had a pack raft on you?" Like I had forgotten. Like, you get sucked into trekking. You think that's the fastest way to go. How did you find the river travel? How did you find the lake travel? Was there blowdown in the water? I heard beaver dams were quite the feature you saw.
Damn.
Did the dam system, did that give you what you thought it was? Like, did the water-based travel, while it was 50-50, were you as fast as you thought you'd be?
Well, after the first paddle that everybody did, we actually chose to paddle across Clear Lake a little bit of the ways up. If you see the map there, some people trekked around it. We looked at it and we figured, we can transition into and out of the raft in about 15 minutes. Our paddling is probably about 4 miles an hour. And I think that paddling across this lake is going to be just about as fast as trekking around it. And we came here to paddle, so let's paddle.
Well, if you go.
And it was awesome.
Yeah. And I agree. Usually the rough rule of thumb with a pack raft is between 3 and 4 miles an hour, right there. I know many people who've transitioned into pack rafts from other boats. It gets them crazy because they don't feel like they're moving at all in them, but 3 to 4 miles an hour. And to your point, the breaking the boats down, packing them up and moving them was worth your while to come across that body of water.
We found we were taking less than 15 minutes. We were working well together, moving very quickly. And so we could inflate the raft and be paddling in about 15 and then, go the other direction and have it packed up and moving in about the same.
Did you find that the navigation was rather straightforward, or did you have to rely upon those did you ever feel like you were turned around out there? Or for the most part, clearly you did very well on the course, so I don't think you got massively lost out there. When did it get challenging for you?
Where Earl was telling me, what are you doing here?
Yeah, we were talking about it, even as we were moving, we were talking about there were lots of little terrain features that would not show up on the maps just because they were so small. And the way the density of the forest, maybe some of it having to do with the blowdowns, we just couldn't see very far. So it was hard to pick up and the terrain, some of the terrain features were more mild. So you weren't in steep, mountain peaks and things like that. It was more mellow landscape. So it was a little hard to read exactly where you were. And the rate of travel was sometimes pretty slow just because we were going over logs, around things.
And that's challenging too, because when you're climbing over things, you're trying to go in a certain bearing, a certain direction. When you're climbing over things, you're making those micro adjustments along the way, and slowly you might get off. In terms of your map and compass, did you go with bearings? Did you get to a certain feature and retake a bearing, or did you, because of the size of the course, you just headed what you felt was the proper direction, knowing that there was some sort of backstop? How did you protect yourself from going off in the wrong area?
I think what you just said there's, looking for backstops. We can keep going this direction roughly, up this reentrant. And if we find that we're going down and the slope goes down to the east, then we went too far. We should have turned left. And so it was hard at any one time to be confident that this is right where we're at, just because we couldn't see very well. And there was a lot of those smaller terrain features that looked like, hey, this looks like it should be a reentrant. No, it's not on the map.
And I'm assuming too, from a navigation perspective, not having those traditional backstops that you would see in our adventure racing, like a reentrant or a mountain or even a road, you were just out there. So there was a lot of that. I'm assuming there was a lot of uncertainty during the race. Like, we think we're going the right way, but
there was to some extent, but we're working with the large features, and okay, we've been going east for almost an hour, and it really starts to drop off steep. We know, looking at the map, okay, there's nowhere else that we can be at this point, so time to go north.
Gotcha.
But because of the visibility, and I'll say it was still somewhat challenging navigation, we ended up picking up more my orienteering collecting features than we had originally planned. Just okay, let's go get to that lake. And when we get there, we're going to know that we're there. And so we made a point of hitting those very large, kind of hard to miss collecting features on the way to be super confident of exactly where we were.
And that's a really good point. It's so well mapped in terms of the shape of the lakes that when you got to a certain lake, you kind of knew the lake really became like the landmark for you to work off of. And then you'd cross the lake, and then you would just go on from there. And that's a really, and once again, because Eric was wise enough to make it a pack raft race, that was the way to go, right? Was to use those boats, and you had a 50-50 movement over time. How did you find? For some
of the lakes, some of them we walked around just because, this isn't long enough. It's 750 meters and just stay on foot.
It's not worth it. Yeah.
How thick did you find the brush?
Most of it actually was just I almost call it just standard. I mean, it was the areas that were blow down, we could move through. There was definitely some marsh that we got in that was slow, but it wasn't. We chose a little bit higher route. I think we talked about some routes early on. We ended up choosing kind of the higher ground.
Was that to stay out of the muck?
Yes. Yeah, we just felt like we're going to be living in the swamp the whole race, and we knew we'd be doing enough of that with the paddle and some things there. We had some areas that there's no way to avoid it. And this is called the Five Ponds Wilderness. I mean,
right. Yeah. You're going in the water, right? Did you ever find yourself wise decision, right? You're going to be wet by being in water. You're going to go high. Because water runs down. And so you're staying out of swamps. Did you ever find yourself in that really nasty kind of up to your hips sort of muck that you had to fight your way through? Or were you able to come around a lot of that?
We didn't end up in any muck, not really. At all. We did later on in the race end up doing the most awful, horriblest bushwhack I have ever done. And I think we both agreed that
in the history
that's
of racing.
A pretty big statement. Let's back that up a little bit. You have, between the two of you, have decades of racing. You're saying that the Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge gave you the worst bushwhacking experience of your adventure racing life.
For one section, Michael, how long was it? It wasn't very long.
320 meters, and it took us over 25 minutes.
Oh, okay. And what made it so brutal? Was it rhododendron? Was it just thick? Was it? And there was no going around it. You had to go through.
Yeah.
Well, some teams actually kind of got rejected a couple times, turned around, went back and added an hour or so, just saying we're not going to go through this. What we ended up doing, but first of all, it was dark, it was raining, and this stuff was so thick that you could not see more than about 6 feet in front of you, and
were you still trying to get the CP number 2? Was this on the way to 2 or was this after you got 2?
This was after 2. This was getting to number 3.
Yeah. Good, so at least you had the psychological box of checking off 2.
Oh, well, we kind of felt like, man, we're getting near the finish. We know, it's easy from here until it wasn't.
It's always a great thing to say to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Really.
Well, that's a good point though, right? The amount of distance between 1 and 2 was so long and so hard. You couldn't help but think when you got to 2 that, we'll mail it in now. 3, 4, we're done.
Yeah. Once we hit 2, we knew we were going to be on some trails. So it was the first time we actually started moving on trail. And that was actually the first time since we'd left checkpoint 1. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, that we saw a team. We had gone a completely different route than another team. We probably left checkpoint 1 a bit ahead of them. I don't know when they hit checkpoint 1, but
maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah. And we got to checkpoint 2. This was, 7.5 hours later, within a couple minutes of them. And they did completely different route. They kind of took the foot travel faster route that we looked at, I think. But it was very different. Different kind of race to not having seen teams. Usually if you're racing, you're seeing teams and you're kind of judging your strategy based on that. And this really wasn't that kind of race at all. It was more of just how well can we do with our particular strategy.
How'd you deal with that psychologically? Obviously you were probably expecting that, right? Knowing so few teams in such a big plot of land.
Well, so we were expecting that. And I guess my approach was not how are we doing compared to other teams, but how much fun are we having?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. At one point in the paddle, I think we'd gotten on the Oswegatchie River. We'd been paddling a little while, and I was just grinning. It was dark. I was grinning ear to ear. We were just having a blast. And Michael said, "I'm smiling right now." And I was like, "Absolutely." It was just the smiles per mile there were pretty high.
In spite of the 30 plus beaver dams we had to cross.
Yeah. So say a bit about that. The type of paddling that you did, right? You had the big lake paddle in the beginning, and then you walked around lakes, and then you did cross some lakes. Was it always class 1? Was it class 2? Did it ever get bumpy on you? Or was it just?
Never did. It was all calm. We heard what sounded like rapids, and it was just another beaver dam.
Okay. And rough count of beaver dams. Did you stop counting eventually?
At least 30. That's my somewhat educated estimate.
Right.
So interesting question. When you would come upon them, clearly beaver dams, as we know, huge, massive coming on there. Would you get out of the water way in advance and walk all the way around it, or would you just climb over the dam itself?
We went right over them. We got really good at getting right up to it. Earl would jump out. We gave up trying to stay out of the water, and just right up to it. Earl jumps out, grabs the front of the boat, pulls it up far enough that I'm not up to my neck in the water.
Got it.
And I jump out. We'd both lift it, carry it over, put it in, down the other side. Some of them were pretty low and easy to get in. Some of them took a little bit of work. Had a couple of foot drop from the high side to the low side.
Okay. Now I apologize for not asking. Were you in 2 single boats or in a double?
We're paddling a tandem.
In a tandem. Okay. And so how did that work out in terms of? Was that? I mean, I'm assuming speed wise, it probably helped, right?
It paddled faster. I think Eric was a little bit skeptical at first of the tandem. Hands down, that was absolutely the best way to go. We paddled. I think this is actually the first time that Eric and I have paddled together, or that Earl and I have paddled together, and we just clicked, and it went great.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that being the case, with two being faster, we know that two people in one of those boats will tend to move much faster. I wonder if that gave you much of an advantage overall in the race, as opposed to other teams that were two singles.
Oh, absolutely. Crossing the lake, we probably were 20 to 30 minutes faster than teams with two singles. And then down the river, that just adds up. We were moving much faster.
Had you ever paddled a tandem with anybody before?
I did in the Endless Mountains.
Right?
Yeah, Kristen and I paddled when we could paddle. yeah,
that was the infamous Boney first paddle section. That was more of a walk. Very nice. Yes. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, what about nutrition? Did you have 30 hours of food on you? Did you look at the course and say, we're going to get through this quicker?
No, I was ready to go for 30 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. I already had enough for 30 hours. We felt like we were going to get done earlier, but you just never know. I mean, we hadn't been in that, neither one of us had raced in that area. So we didn't have like a local knowledge of, how long should it take to cross this area? We're just looking at a map. We don't really know the terrain as much as far as other, there's mountains and things like that, but you don't know the speed of travel at all. And I think we both, packed just about right. I mean, I don't feel like I overpacked. Some races, you get to the finish line, you're dumping all this food out of your pack. Like, I just carried this for extra training, I guess, but I didn't necessarily in this race.
So how much preparation did you do? Having never raced in the Adirondacks before and not really knowing that terrain, but maybe knowing kind of about it, how much preparation did the two of you do in advance to get ready for that kind of rugged backcountry? Or did you just head into it knowing it was going to be tough?
I did some, overnight, pack craft trips locally here where I live up the Potomac River. I talked a couple people into doing it with me. We did some of that prepping for Endless Mountains, and then I got Paul Morris and a couple other people to do an overnight with me, prepping for this race. Obviously walking up the Potomac on the towpath is very different than the hiking that we're doing. I actually find the off-road travel much easier.
Always. Yeah.
Hiking with a backpack on flat trail is just hard on my knees. I have bad knees. And so once I'm in the woods and it's rugged, I'm much happier.
Yeah. I find for myself that the thing I dread the most in a race is a extended, somewhat downhill gravel walk. It is
worst in the world.
We were in Scotland and we were coming off the first big trek on the Island of Mull just this past August. When I saw what we had to walk down, I knew my feet were just going to be shredded, which is counterintuitive, right? You would think that a road is safe, quote unquote safe. It just eats your feet alive. And so to your point, being in the woods and, the different foot placement and things like that. Well, how did your feet hold up overall? Do you do anything special for your feet to treat them? You have any hiker goo? What kind of socks do you use? Your feet are your fortune adventure racing. How'd they hold together?
And Michael's got a whole ceremony, I think, before the race with his feet that he does. I don't know, 6 or 8 pairs of socks, these special magic creams and stuff. And I just put my shoes on, but
I didn't have blisters. Earl had big, ugly blisters.
Right. So make fun of me all you want, Earl. Right, Michael? Right. So Michael, in terms of your we'll come back to Earl and his rugged man in the mountains feet in a second and his blisters. You do, we talk about all the time adventure racing for newer racers. Your feet are your fortune, right? You have to take care of them. Do you do the hikers go in advance? Do you do the occasional, I have people do this, they put the hikers go on a few days in advance and sleep in it each night to get the feet ready? Like, how do you keep your feet together?
I haven't done that yet, but I've thought about it. And the reason is in Endless Mountains, obviously long race, lots of wet feet. And I had some pretty ugly blisters on the soles of my feet at the end of that. And it wasn't on side or typical places that people get blisters. It was like right on the thick part, sole of my foot, just because my feet were wet for so long.
Gotcha.
And so, those had come off. And so I'm building up some of the sole of my feet. I go barefoot a lot. And so I did end up using the hiker goo and just coated my feet with it, put a very thin pair of Injinji socks on and then another pair on over that. and my feet felt great at the end.
What kind of shoes do you use?
So I have been doing all of my racing in Ultra. Let's see here. What are they now? What's everybody using?
Well, they're the Ultras, right? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like you, by the way. I know I would use Solomon's, but Ultra is what you use. And how do you do with the Ultras?
I like the toe box in the Ultras. Although I've found in a few races that I wish I had a little bit more stability in the shoe. So I'm almost at the point where, particularly for longer races, multi-day races, I want a few pair of different kinds of shoes.
Right.
Just change things up and expose your feet to different things rather than doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah, I did that. And once again, in Scotland, I did that. I had a backup pair of shoes, which I changed halfway through the race. Great move. My feet just needed a different set of shoes. Earl, how about you? Aside from putting sandpaper in your feet, what else do you do to get yourself ready?
Well, it's funny. I was talking with Michael before the race. He was looking at, he's like, man, did you wash those socks? I'm like, yeah, I washed these socks. It's the same pair of socks I've been racing in for like 8 years, every race I've done. And they really held up. And I've only gotten blisters twice in all of my races that I've done. And this happened to be one of them. But the sock finally gave away, and where I got a blister is because it failed. So I lost a good $50 size on the back of my heel. But I made an agreement with my feet a long time ago. Like, I won't complain about them if they don't complain to me, and we just settle up at the end of the race and figure it out.
What do you use shoe-wise? What do you put on your feet?
I've been racing in Solomon's for quite a while. For the longer, if you're going to have to do a lot of miles, they're so light. There's not a whole lot of cushion, so you pay for it that way. But from just the mobility, and I really like to be able to feel everything. And I really feel like I can feel the terrain well.
I feel so. Solomon definitely they drain and dry very well.
Yeah,
which is
thinking of this. I had ankle gaiters on as well, thinking about the potential muck that we might be in.
Gotcha.
But
were you wearing any bash guards or shin guards on your legs?
No, I wear compression socks up to my knees like an old man.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. As far
I wear
as,
my orienteering knickers.
Okay.
And also compression sleeves on my calves. So my legs are pretty much fully covered in the woods.
Gotcha. How'd you do with the weather? Was it warm? Was it cold? Did you nail your clothing for that?
We really did, I think. Yeah. I think we both brought just enough, but not too much.
I was a little bit worried as it was getting dark that, maybe I actually had a pair of my shell pants, and I was thinking I might have to break these out. But the rain didn't come. It didn't get as cold as it had the night before when we were camping, and it ended up just being super nice. So gotcha. I did not get cold at all.
Yeah, because you do have some of those microclimates up there get pretty cold. When you're in the mountains, and I always pull 10 degrees off the temperature. Right. I always plan on being ready for 10 degrees colder. Did the Adirondacks live up to your expectations in regards to ruggedness? Was it what you thought it would be?
It was different. I backpacked in the upper Adirondacks a few times, and completely different. I had never been in that wilderness, and it was just spectacular. There were moments in the race where I was picking on Michael for not bringing his camera. No, there were just postcard moments. You're out there looking across the water and looking and seeing the mountains in the distance, and it was just beautiful.
Michael, how about you?
It was spectacular. I think pretty much through the whole race, we were talking about how much we wanted to go back.
Yes.
Come back again with the pack raft and a tent and stay for a week.
It's wild when you think about it too. If you consider the fact that most likely, aside from people who are indigenous to that area, those lakes had never been covered by somebody on a boat before, and so you had a chance to pack raft and to travel across these remote, rugged lakes because you're not carrying a canoe in there, you're not carrying a kayak in there, and so unless somebody brought a pack raft along, you touch places that nobody ever probably touched in a boat before, notwithstanding the people who were native to that area.
Although I got to say the first lake that we paddled across after checkpoint one, we put in the water, we paddle across the lake, a little over a kilometer, I think, kilometer and a half. We get to the other end of the lake after a several mile trek on a trail. It was a decent trail, but it was not a road. No. And there's a guy in a canoe. And there's no way to get to that lake other than the trail that we came up. And apparently this dude hiked that trail carrying his canoe.
Did you offer to buy your pack raft on the spot?
He was not very sociable, actually. He was just kind of doing his own thing in the middle of the lake.
Well, probably thought he's out there by himself, and he just you guys come walking along. These races are all over the park. Right.
I think he was trying to think about the trip back, but he looked like he was just totally
I got to carry this damn thing back.
Yeah. You probably saw your paddles. I mean, like, how'd you guys get? What do you do with those paddles? When darkness came, you started at, you went 15 hours, right? So you started at 8 in. You finished it after dark, right? You went through. You had a good travel. When darkness came, where were you on the course? Were you beginning to close into the finish? Obviously you paddled in the dark to finish the race. How did the fall of nighttime affect your attitude and your movement?
But by the time it got dark, it was between checkpoint 2 and 3. So we did that awful bushwhack we mentioned in the dark, which was really challenging because it's when you're in stuff that thick, and not only was it thick, and so that you couldn't see through it, but it got thick to the point where you couldn't move through it.
You were stuck in there.
We wanted to make sure that we hit the river at the right spot. We didn't want to miss the bend that the next checkpoint was at. We wanted to put in before the checkpoint, go around the next bend. So the bearing that we were traveling was really important, but it was impossible to travel on a bearing in that stuff. So we ended up, leapfrogging Earl's idea that worked out really well. One of us would hold the compass and a bearing and tell the other person, like, keep going, move to your left, move to your right. And we were doing this like 15 feet at a time, if that.
Wow. And you're deep in the race too. I mean, you're getting fatigued by that.
We were getting fatigued by then, a little bit frustrated. That was, if there was a down point in the race, that was it. Like, this really, really sucked. And I was not having a whole bunch of fun at that point.
Right. Yeah, you guys were, before you were skipping through the woods, high-fiving each other. And all of a sudden it's like, this is really, really hard. And this is.
We looked at it. See, we were leaving the reason why we ended up in that particular spot is we were leaving the trail at a bend, because we were leaving at a known point, and checkpoint 3 really wasn't that far away.
It was less than 400 meters.
Yeah. Right. And we're like, all the bushwhack we'd seen so far, everything was, we could move through, and we'd seen some thick things, especially by the river, but nothing like that. And, but once we got in it, we realized, we could back out, but we did the whole math of, it's not worth it to back out. We're already committed. We're on a bearing. And when Michael's saying 15 feet, you would have to go to the right or left, 30, 40 feet to get back online. And by the time that Michael got 15 feet away from me, this is at night with his headlamp on, I couldn't see him.
Right.
That's how thick it was. I mean, it was impenetrable with light. So I had to hear him talking and try to get him on a talking bearing and tell him to stop. And then he'd take the bearing and I would leapfrog him.
That's a wild one. And it's funny too how you're outdoors, but it gets claustrophobic.
It was awful. That was so thick, and it's above your head thick, even like the long grasses and stuff. And so you're down in this stuff, kind of wading through it. And the only saving grace of that bushwhack is there were no thorns.
Right. Bright spot. Right. You always find a bright spot.
Right. I think they should put that on the flyers for 5 Pond Wilderness. Like, we didn't run into any greenbrier.
Nothing.
Usually if you're in the races here, you come back, I come back, I'm shredded.
Yeah.
Wow, we didn't if we'd had Greenbrier in there, we'd probably still be up there tangled in the bush.
We'd be looking for you. So leaving the trail and moving the distance to CP3 and coming through that really thick far. How right were you in terms of your attack to CP3? Did you walk out of that and walk right into the CP, or did you have to do some work along the river?
No, we hit it right where we wanted to, which was the bend before the CP.
Correct. Yep.
So I wanted to have a little bit of time on the river, I wasn't going to try and nail it and then, miss
right.
Downriver in particular. So we were definitely shooting for the bend upstream of CP3 and we nailed it. We came out exactly where we wanted to. And
so then from CP3 to CP4, it looks like the river was going to be your strategy. Now, was that Beaver Dam Central?
That was not our original strategy. I'm suffering, like I said, from sore knees, and I was not a fan of wanting to spend a lot of time on trails. But Earl was bound and determined to back out and get back on the trail. But once we were about halfway through that bushwhack, I think Earl decided that there was no way he was going to turn around and do that over again. And so he said, I guess we're paddling the rest of the way. And I said, amen to that.
And from the look of the map, it looks like it's a river, but it's very swampy. Were you able to paddle through that, or did you get stuck?
No, we hit a few beaver dams, but it was much better than further upstream, the first section that we paddled. So it was quite nice, actually.
So it sounds like this is one of those races where all of the challenge was front loaded. Right. You had the initial paddle to CP1. You had the long trek from 1 to 2. Right. You had to do all that work there. 2 to 3 was on trail, but getting into 3 was through that really terrible Greenbrier and all that thickness. And then it feels like the river kind of was on the habit of bringing you home. Yeah. Right. It feels like it was pulling you in the right direction. Although,
2 to 3 did not have to have that awful bushwhack.
Right.
About a kilometer or so before that bushwhack, the river was right there beside us, and we were moving so nicely on the trail. We just decided to stay on the trail. Once we were into that bushwhack, we were saying, man, we should have put in when the river was like 10 feet away from us.
It literally bumped right up against the trail. And actually that was one of my questions was, I'm assuming you stayed on the trail because the trail travel was so much faster than getting on the water, because even the river itself on the map turns a lot on the map. And therefore you were doing the math on pure distance.
Trail was pretty straight. We were moving quickly on the trail. It was nice. And if we'd known about the bushwhack, we would have put in on the trail, obviously. So,
but that's an important navigation thing to say for the folks who are working on their navigation. Like, you make the best decision you have with the information at your disposal, right? And trail's moving well. It's not that far from the trail. This is clearly the way to go. You didn't know you were walking into that impenetrable bushwhack, and that's just the way it goes, right? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and at least one other team hit that bushwhack, tried it, got rejected, turned around and went back.
Took the trail to and ended up paddling down.
They went backwards to where they could see the river and put in back then, and probably lost an hour doing that.
Okay.
We even joked as we're running by it, and, hey, it'd be pretty easy to put in there when we're right beside the river. But from the strategy standpoint of navigation, I felt like that was still a very strong strategy. You had no way to know that bushwhack was there.
Right.
We were leaving a very clear, known bend in the trail. It was easy to peel off there. It put us really close to the point. And if it had been anything like the rest of the backcountry travel, it would have been very.
It would have taken less than 10 minutes. We would have been there. As it was, almost 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's racing, right? Exactly. That's how it goes. And so 3 to 4. It sounds like you paddled down the river, and then from 4 to the finish, it feels like you kind of just took it home from there. There wasn't really a whole lot of, or am I missing something about the end of your race?
No, it was really straightforward. Hit 4, it was visible from the river, picked that up, and then there was a section that Eric had told us is rapids and probably pretty bony, and his advice was, you don't want to paddle the rapids at night, and probably not paddleable anyway.
Okay.
And we had seen the very the portion just up from the lake when we're the day prior, and it looked really rocky. So it didn't look like you could paddle it. So
that's right. You had the maps in your hands the day before, so you had a sense of the finish.
Oh yeah, yep. And so easy decision to say, all right, we're going to get out here at the canoe put in. There was a road right down there, and the trail from there, 1.5 2 miles to the finish line.
Yeah, nice. So congratulations. So you went a bit over 15 hours. It has a 30-hour race. Some teams are out there for 27 hours, and so congratulations to you on having such a great race. It's always nice to win, right? As we say where I work with kids. It's fun. Winning is fun, right? It's fun to win.
Winning is fun.
Winning is fun. Yeah. Did you going into the race? And it's all conjecture before the race started. Did the two of you feel well suited to what you had in front of you, or did you have any major trepidation about the terrain and what was chewing at you before the race started?
Nothing. I was super confident that we were both ready. I did not go into it thinking that we're a shoe in for a win by any means, but I absolutely felt we can do this. We know how to navigate. We're good in the woods. We're both good paddlers, and we're going to do fine.
Now, Eric has talked about how the Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge is the child, if you will, of the Alaska Mountain Wilderness Classic, the ANWC, which is this beautiful race out in Alaska. And this is somewhat kind of based upon that. Have the two of you have you now considering going out and giving something big like that a shot? Like, now that you have time on your feet, now that you have a pack raft in your pack and you know how to do this, would you find yourself getting into a larger event like this? Or was this a good event? You're happy to check the box off, come back next year to defend your title. You're almost morally obligated to do so. But do you find yourself itching to do something like this again? There's a lot of these races around. There's several in Montana. There's one in Alaska, obviously. Or has the box been checked for the two of you?
Nope, box hasn't been checked. That was a ton of fun, and what I thought going into it with the lack of logistics headaches and gear bends and all that stuff, it was just fantastic. It was really awesome to just have the two of us in our backpacks and be making decisions based on what we were carrying. So I totally consider doing more of those and bigger and longer.
So let me ask you this question. What new things did you learn? Like, this was new, right? This was a pack raft race, tandem, between your food, your navigation, your footwear, your clothing, all of those things. What new learnings did you take out of this race?
Probably time to buy a new pair of socks. 8 years.
8 years. It was good. They treated you well, right?
They treated me well. I might hang them on the wall and scare people when they come into the house. But I learned. I enjoyed racing with Michael. We've only done a couple races together. We really, like Mike was saying, right out of the gate, we started off paddling. We clicked right away. It wasn't. It's like we've been paddling a long time, and it's just, even if it's extreme wilderness, there's still, especially when you're in race mode, the amount of fun and excitement out there is just incredible. And I would definitely do races, wherever. I mean, I'm always thinking about, what's the next adventure? When you get done with one, you start thinking, what's next? And so I've just been looking around and haven't really picked anything yet, but really, really excited to kind of take off with it. And I kind of was checking in with Michael there before the race because I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to race. I'd actually injured my leg. I got a pretty bad rope burn from doing some tree logging. And so I've been doing my energetic movement system for slower version. I couldn't really move very fast because I had a big open wound. So about a week before the race, it finally sealed up enough, and I did one test climb to make sure my skin was going to hold together, and it did. And then I think the base level of the energetic system that I'm doing is really paid off.
And I want to come back to that in a second, but I want to ask Michael, what did you learn from this race? Anything new come across?
I don't think I learned anything new other than how much I really enjoyed the pack raft. I mean, I've done a little bit of it. I've done some here in Maryland, DC area on the Potomac. Had it out on some class 2, and I enjoy paddling it. It's fun. I loved paddling it in the wilderness, and just. I want to go back and check out all those little lakes. So I think what I learned is, man, this pack raft is fun, and it gives you so much freedom to just go explore.
Yeah. I agree. I own several alpaca rafts, and they are go anywhere machines, right? Every blue line on the map becomes a trail. And if you get the kind if you get the Explorer, you can store your gear on it. I've done multiple day trips up in the Adirondacks with just to break the pack down and put it in your backpack and then just go. And I'm a big fan of Alpaca. I find that they make the best. I think they were a sponsor of the race. So thank you, Alpaca, for diving in and helping out. I have a note to myself here on the computer when I do these interviews, ask about training. Rarely do I ask about the training. And so, Earl, let me come back to you a little bit. You mentioned, you called it energetic movement system. Not a phrase I've heard a whole lot when it comes to training. Tell us a bit about that.
This is a system that was developed by my instructor, Ed Hampton. Ed Hampton's been teaching, training, studying. He's a human genius, the way I see him. He's been looking at movements and training folks for 50 years, mostly all in the martial arts realm, the internal martial arts, where it developed from the inside out. So you're getting healthier through connections. And when I started doing adventure races, he took one of the movements that we've been doing from a martial arts standpoint and changed it and presented it back to me and said, hey, go do this, try this. And that's all I've done. For the last 15 years, I haven't run at all to train, but in the races, we'll be covering quite a few miles. And I'm faster now than I was when I was in my 20s and I was running consistently to prepare for 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons and things. But it's giving, I really feel like I've got rocket fuel in my system now, where I used to have old leaded gas. But it really has changed, given me a whole new lease on life. I've got knee injuries as far as, I tore 4.5 ligaments. I'm not supposed to be able to do any of this stuff.
Right.
And this system is, because it doesn't have any impact. The system, the way you move, you're not moving into the ground at all. You're just moving across it, and you're really not moving at a high, rapid pace. So through your training, you're not beating yourself up.
It sounds like it takes away the up and down, right? Banging your knees, the cartilage. It goes more of a side to side. Very nice. It's obviously it served you very well because you got to stand on top of the podium. So good on you. Michael, how about you? What's your training look like?
Well, I'm really interested in what Earl's doing because I have bad knees, and I was told about 10 years ago that I need a knee replacement, and I've avoided it for the last 10 years, still holding off, but I don't know how much longer I can do that. So I'm trails and any hard surface I don't like, and so I train as much as I can off-road. I do run some, unlike Earl, but I'm really intrigued by what he's doing. What I really focused on getting in some distance with the pack and paddling. And I do that anyway. I have some friends here that I do some whitewater paddling with. So I spend a lot of time paddling my whitewater boats and the pack raft. And that I think did help in this race. It's, combination and being 50-50, it was not running, it was just moving.
Yeah. And I find that a common thing I hear when I talk to adventure racers, and it skews a bit towards the older adventure racer, older being anybody over 40. They talk often about how they have a base of fitness that they hold on to. And the trick is they just try to be consistent over time. They try to move regularly. They don't let there be large gaps of time out there. And maybe work commitments get in the way, but they try to do something every day. Every day they try to go 5 out of every 7 days they want to do something. And they always shoot for a big weekend, right? Every weekend is, you'll laugh. The one day of the week I've never recorded an episode of the Dark Zones on a Saturday. because everybody can do it is out on a Saturday, out in the woods somewhere, going for a big training day.
Doing something.
Exactly. I tried to get someone on one time, and he goes, "What self-respecting adventure racer would be free on a Saturday to talk to you?" I said, "You're absolutely right." I said, "That's a good point." It sounds like this experience was very good for the two of you, besides from the fact that you're very successful speed-wise. But it sounds like you also took away from the experience the idea that the pack raft and the wilderness is a very, very nice combination. It sounds like there's more of that in your future, whether it be through a racing perspective, or whether it be through just a pure old-fashioned adventure perspective. And, start looking at maps in your area and, there's this water here. Can I connect this? Things like that. So I think Eric did a great job for his first Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge. He's not yet calling it a classic. I think to his credit, he's calling it a challenge, not a classic. Maybe there's a number of how many years you have to have it before it's a classic. Before I let the two of you go and get back into your regular lives, any closing thoughts you want to share about your experience at the Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge?
It was a fantastic experience. I absolutely want to do it again. And I like every place I go now, if I'm going to be there for a couple of days, I'm looking at a map ahead of time. Should I bring my pack raft? Can I get a few hours and go find some water to paddle? And it has changed the way I think about maps. So I absolutely love it. I love the pack raft, and I'm excited about doing a lot more.
Wonderful. And Earl, closing thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah. Unlike Michael, I don't have a pack raft yet. So it's on my short list of things to go acquire. I've been a whitewater rafting guide for 30 years. And the idea of pack rafting and putting in it, maybe the takeout for the New River Gorge and running the gorge up and pack rafting it down is on my list of personal adventures now. So it was absolutely an amazing adventure. The versatility of the pack raft is really unique. I've been in lots of paddle crafts of every sort, size, and shape, and it's really takes the cake when it comes to mobility in the wilderness.
There you have it, episode number 51 of The Dark Zone. Thanks for joining us, dear listeners. Hope you enjoyed hearing Earl and Michael's adventures. Be sure to check us out on www.ardarkzone.com. Drop me an email, brian@ardarkzone.com, if you have any suggestions or ideas for shows. A great way to help The Dark Zone out is to go to your streaming platform of choice and give us a review and a rating and subscribe and all that fun stuff. The Dark Zone will always remain free to its listeners, and your support makes that happen. Safe racing, safe training, and see you on the other side. Good luck to everybody.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
You're going the wrong way! What? You're going the wrong way! He says we're going the wrong way.
Oh, he's drunk. How would he know where we're going?
Yeah, how would he know? Thank you. Thanks a lot.